I woke up to the faint light creeping in through the blinds, my body feeling like lead, weighed down by an exhaustion that never seemed to go away. As soon as I moved, a sharp sting shot up my arm, forcing a hiss through my teeth. Instinctively, my hands traveled to my forearms and then to my chest. Something rough grazed against my fingertips. My pulse quickened. I threw the covers off in a panic and looked down at myself. More of them. Thin, red, fresh. Lines crisscrossing my skin like someone had taken a blade to me in the dead of night. I sucked in a breath, my head swimming. Not again. I turned to the other side of the bed, heart hammering against my ribs. Emily lay there, curled up, golden hair spilling over her pillow, breathing slow and steady, completely undisturbed. For a split second, I debated waking her up, telling her, showing her. But I'd done that before, and every time, the response was the same, a soft, dismissive smile, her fingers threading through my hair as she whispered, "It's just a bad dream, baby." But this wasn't a dream. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and stumbled toward the bathroom, flipping on the harsh, sterile light. My breath caught in my throat. Under the brightness, the cuts were even clearer, thin, precise, too clean to be from tossing and turning in my sleep. I ran my hands over them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had I done this to myself somehow? No. My nails were too short, and even if I had scratched at my skin, they wouldn't be this perfect. A shiver ran down my spine. I splashed cold water on my face, gripping the edge of the sink to steady myself. The mirror reflected a face I barely recognized. Hollow eyes, dark circles, skin pale and drawn from too many restless nights. Behind me, a sleepy voice broke the silence. "Jake." I turned to see Emily still buried beneath the covers, blinking at me through drowsy blue eyes. "You okay?" she mumbled. I hesitated. The words sat heavy on my tongue. "Look at me. Look at what's happening." But my mouth refused to form them. Emily propped herself up on one elbow, her hair falling in messy waves around her face. "Another bad dream." My throat tightened. A dream. That's what she had called it last time. And the time before that. For the past 2 weeks, I'd woken up like this, sliced open, confused, afraid, and every morning she had the same response: stress. Exhaustion. "Maybe you're sleepwalking." I sank back onto the edge of the bed, rubbing my face. I woke up with more cuts. For the briefest moment, something unreadable flickered in her expression. Then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by that same soft, reassuring smile. She reached out, running delicate fingers along my arm, right over the fresh wounds. "Jake, you're doing this to yourself," she said, voice gentle. I yanked my arm away, the frustration bubbling up faster than I could control. "No, I'm not." I shot up, pacing the room. "Emily, these aren't scratches. They're too straight, too deep. And if I was doing this in my sleep, how the hell would I not wake up?" She sighed, sitting up fully now, her expression shifting into something more serious. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe you're just restless at night, moving more than usual." I turned to her, my pulse pounding. I was stressed. I was exhausted. But this, I gestured to my arms, my chest. "This is different. You really think I did this to myself?" Her lips pressed together like she was carefully choosing her words. "Maybe you should see someone. A doctor." I let out a bitter laugh, running a hand through my hair. "A doctor? You think I'm losing my mind?" "No," she said quickly, too quickly. I think your body is reacting to something. Maybe it's a sleep disorder? Like REM behavior disorder. It could explain everything." I wanted to believe that. I really did. Some neat, scientific answer that would make sense of all of this. But something inside me, the raw, instinctive part of my brain that had kept me alive through every near miss in my life, was screaming at me that this wasn't natural. Emily reached for my hand again, her voice soft. "Come back to bed. We'll figure this out together, okay?" I hesitated, but eventually, I lay down beside her. She curled up next to me, her palm resting lightly against my chest, her breath warm against my skin. It should have been comforting. But I stayed awake long after she drifted off, staring at the ceiling. The fresh sting of my wounds burned against the sheets. Something was happening to me, and I was going to find out what. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. My fingers lightly traced the thin, healing scars along my forearm. The wounds weren't deep, but they were too precise, too deliberate. Whoever, or whatever, was doing this wasn't just scratching me. It was calculated. Across the room, Emily stood at the dresser, brushing her long hair in slow, practiced strokes. Her reflection in the mirror was composed, almost indifferent. "You're doing it to yourself in your sleep," she said, her voice light, as if she were talking about the weather. I looked up, watching her carefully. There was no concern, no urgency. Just that same calm, patient expression, the one she always wore when she dismissed my fears. I stopped myself, biting back the frustration. I had said this before. Over and over again. I wasn't scratching myself. I wasn't sleepwalking. I didn't own anything sharp enough to leave these kinds of marks. And yet, every morning, there were new scars. New evidence that something was happening to me while I slept. Emily turned toward me, tilting her head slightly in that practiced way of hers, the way people do when they're trying to seem sympathetic. "Jake, stress does strange things to people. Maybe you should talk to someone about it." My jaw tightened. There it was again. The same subtle suggestion. See a therapist. Get help. It wasn't just about making me doubt myself anymore. She wanted me to accept it. To believe I was losing my mind. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingertips against my temples. My body felt heavier with each passing day, exhausted in a way that sleep never seemed to fix. My dreams, when I had them, were broken, fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. I would remember falling asleep next to my wife, warm and safe under the covers. And then, nothing. Just blackness. And then the scars. I looked up, my voice steady. "I want to set up a camera." The air in the room shifted. Emily stopped brushing her hair. Just for a fraction of a second, the frown on her face appeared. And then, just as quickly, it vanished, replaced by a soft, almost amused smile. "A camera," she repeated, as if I had just suggested something ridiculous. "I need to know what's happening while I sleep." She set the brush down on the dresser and turned to me, walking over with slow, measured steps. When she knelt in front of me, her hands came to rest lightly on my arm, tracing over the fresh wounds in feather-light touches. "Jake," she murmured, "do you really think that's necessary?" Her touch was warm. Too warm. My stomach twisted at the way she was looking at me, patient, understanding, the perfect image of a concerned wife. "You don't believe me," I said, more a statement than a question. Emily let out a soft sigh, rubbing my arm as if to soothe me. "It's not that, honey. I just don't think you're going to find what you're looking for. What if you watch the footage and all you see is yourself scratching in your sleep? Won't that just make you feel worse?" I didn't answer, because a small part of me, the exhausted, desperate part, was afraid she might be right. Emily smiled and kissed my temple. "Let's not overthink this, okay? I'll make you some tea. It'll help you relax." She stood up and walked out of the room, humming softly under her breath. I exhaled, staring at the doorway long after she was gone. Something about this didn't sit right. The way she dismissed my fear so easily. The way she always had an answer, an excuse. I lifted my arm, tilting it so the light caught the faint pink lines on my skin. The way she brushed them off, like they were nothing, like they weren't even there, terrified me more than the wounds themselves. Something was wrong. And I was finally going to prove it. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined waking up with fresh cuts, new, deliberate wounds I couldn't explain. No more excuses. No more letting Emily brush this off. I needed answers. The idea had been gnawing at me for days. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I needed proof. So, the next morning, while Emily was out running errands, I made my move. I drove to an electronics store across town, where no one would recognize me, and bought a small, high-resolution night vision camera. It was discreet, easy to hide, exactly what I needed. When I got home, I took my time setting it up, positioning it carefully on the bookshelf across from our bed. The angle was perfect. It would capture everything. Emily couldn't know. If she saw it, she'd just laugh it off, call me paranoid, or worse, she'd make sure it never recorded anything useful. That night, as we got ready for bed, I forced myself to act normal. Emily moved around the room, brushing her hair, slipping into her usual soft, comfortable pajamas. She had no idea I was watching her differently now. She turned to me, offering that gentle, reassuring smile. "You seem calmer tonight," she said, slipping under the covers. "See? A little rest helps, doesn't it?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah. I guess I just needed to clear my head." I lay down beside her, my body stiff, every muscle tense beneath the sheets. She curled up next to me, resting her hand lightly on my chest, her breath warm against my skin. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared at the bookshelf, where the tiny lens of the hidden camera sat silently recording. For the first time, I wasn't going to wake up questioning myself. I was going to wake up with proof. The next morning, I woke up before Emily. My body ached, my arms stung, and I knew there would be fresh marks. But this time, I didn't immediately check my skin. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, careful not to disturb her, and went straight to my laptop. My fingers trembled as I plugged in the memory card from the hidden camera. The file loaded. The screen flickered to life. At first, the footage showed nothing unusual, just me and Emily lying in bed, our bodies still beneath the sheets. The room was quiet, dimly lit by the glow of the bedside clock. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. And then, at 2:47 a.m., she moved. Emily sat up slowly, her head tilting ever so slightly as she watched me. A chill crawled up my spine. She wasn't groggy. She wasn't tossing in her sleep. She was completely awake. For a long moment, she just sat there, studying me, unmoving. Then, in one smooth motion, she reached out and brushed the hair from my forehead with a touch so gentle it made my stomach turn. I didn't react. I didn't wake up. Then, I saw it. She reached toward the nightstand. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath held so tight in my chest it hurt. Something small and metallic caught the dim light, a razor-thin blade. The blood in my veins turned ice-cold. Emily lifted my arm with slow, careful precision. The way a nurse might handle a patient. The way someone would touch something fragile. Then, with calm, practiced ease, she pressed the blade just below my elbow and dragged it downward. A slow, steady, clean cut. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. The realization hit me like a gut punch. She knew I wouldn't wake up. She had done this before. I swallowed hard, gripping the edge of my desk. I kept watching, even though my instincts were screaming at me to shut the laptop, to pretend I hadn't seen this. She tilted her head again, like she was admiring her work. Then, without hesitation, she wiped the blade clean, placed it back on the nightstand, and pulled the blanket over my arm, hiding the fresh wound. She lay back down beside me, curled into me, rested her head on my shoulder, like nothing had happened. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking so badly I had to press them against my thighs to steady them. How long had she been doing this? How many nights had she cut into me while I lay there, completely unaware? A sick realization hit me like a freight train. She'd been gaslighting me, telling me I was doing this to myself, suggesting I was losing my mind, leading me down a path where I would start to doubt everything, including my own sanity. And if I had never set up the camera, I would have believed her. I would have let her convince me that I was the problem. I inhaled sharply, trying to steady myself, trying to think. What was she doing? Why? This wasn't just some twisted compulsion. There was a reason. There had to be a reason. And I was going to find out. I looked toward the bedroom. Emily was still asleep, breathing softly, her body relaxed and peaceful, like she hadn't just spent the night cutting into me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. If she was capable of this, what else was she planning? I took a deep breath and made a decision. I needed more than footage. I needed proof of her motives. I needed to know exactly what she was after. I reached for my phone, my fingers steady now as I tapped the screen. I started tracking her movements. I knew I couldn't just sit on the footage. I needed more. I needed to know why. Emily wasn't hurting me for no reason. There was something behind this. And if she was going to these lengths to manipulate me, to make me think I was losing my mind, then there had to be a bigger plan. So, I played along. I didn't act any differently that morning. When Emily woke up, I let her kiss me on the cheek, let her run her fingers through my hair like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't watched her carve into my skin just hours before. "Sleep any better?" she asked sweetly as we sipped coffee at the kitchen table. I forced a tired smile. "A little." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I think we should look into that sleep clinic. You're still so exhausted, Jake." There it was. Again. The gentle push. The quiet suggestion that something was wrong with me. I nodded. "Maybe." She smiled. "I can make the call for you. Set everything up." I felt my stomach twist. She wanted control over this process. Over me. But I just smiled back. "That would be great. Thanks, Em." She beamed, clearly pleased. And that's when I knew I was getting close to whatever she was planning. That afternoon, when she left for her usual errands, I followed her. She never suspected a thing. Emily wasn't the kind of person who checked her mirrors or looked over her shoulder. She had no reason to. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted me. I kept my distance as she drove across town, eventually pulling into a cheap hotel parking lot. My pulse pounded in my ears. I watched from my car as she parked, stepped out, and walked through the lobby doors like she'd been here 100 times before. Not a single glance behind her. Not a single hint of nervousness. She wasn't sneaking around. She was confident. Comfortable. That was worse. I waited a few minutes before pulling out my phone. I had installed a tracking app on her device the night before. She'd never even notice. I refreshed the screen, watching the little red dot settle. Room 214. I clenched my jaw. She wasn't just running errands. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, debating whether to go inside. But I needed more than just proof that she was meeting someone. I needed to know what she was saying. So, instead of storming in, I did something smarter. I pulled out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and walked into the hotel like I had a reservation. No one even looked at me. Outside room 214, I pressed my ear against the door. At first, nothing. Just muffled voices. Then, Emily's soft, familiar laugh. Not the polite one she gave at dinner parties. The real one. The kind I hadn't heard in months. And then, a man's voice. Deep, steady. "Come. You need to be patient," he said. Emily sighed. "He's starting to break down. He barely questions me anymore." My breath caught in my throat. A pause. Then the man chuckled. "You always were good at this." Emily let out a soft hum. "By the time it's done, he won't even remember his own name." My stomach dropped. "It has to look like he's doing it to himself," she continued. "If the doctors diagnose him with a psychiatric disorder, the money will be in my name before the divorce even goes through." The hallway suddenly felt too small. Too hot. I felt my breath turn shallow as realization sank in. This wasn't just an affair. She was setting me up. Destroying my credibility, erasing my sanity piece by piece until, eventually, I was locked away, powerless to stop her from taking everything. I had been one step away from falling right into her trap. I swallowed, forcing myself to step away from the door, my hands shaking as I saved the audio recording. The evidence I needed was right there. Emily and her mystery man thought they had already won. They had no idea what was coming next. I had to play the long game. Confronting Emily too soon would have been a mistake. She was too careful, too manipulative. If she felt cornered, she'd find a way to twist it, make me look crazy, make herself the victim. No, I needed to let her think she was still in control. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I pretended to break. The morning after I recorded her conversation at the hotel, I made myself look exhausted. I barely touched my coffee. I let my hands tremble when I reached for my cup. I stared off into space, acting dazed, confused. Emily noticed immediately. "Jake," she said gently, reaching for my hand. "What's wrong?" I let out a shaky breath, rubbing my temples. I don't know," I whispered. "I think I'm getting worse." Her thumb stroked the back of my hand. Soothing, reassuring, like she hadn't been the one who had done this to me. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I swallowed hard, making my voice small, uncertain. "I'm forgetting things. Losing time. I can't even trust myself anymore." That flicker. That glimpse of satisfaction in her eyes. She was enjoying this. This was exactly where she wanted me. So lost, so confused, that I would willingly walk into whatever trap she had set. Emily sighed, playing her role perfectly. "Jake, maybe it's time." I let my eyes dart to hers, feigning nervousness. "Time for what?" She hesitated, then gave me the softest, most understanding smile. "The clinic." I exhaled shakily, running a hand through my hair. "You really think I need to go?" She squeezed my hand. "I just want what's best for you, baby." She was so good at this. So damn good. I nodded slowly. "Okay." She froze. I had never agreed before. Her grip on my hand tightened slightly. "You will." I nodded again. "Yeah, but I need you to help me set everything up. I don't think I can handle it on my own." Her eyes lit up. She thought she had won. "Of course, Jake," she said, brushing her fingers against my cheek. "I'll take care of everything." I swallowed back my disgust. "Thanks, Em. I trust you." The next morning, I sat in my lawyer's office, feeling a strange sense of calm. Eric, my attorney, scrolled through the files on his screen, his expression darkening with every piece of evidence. The video footage, the hotel conversation, the financial records showing Emily's hidden withdrawals, the medical documents she had been quietly altering to make it look like I had a history of mental instability. "This is beyond fraud," Eric muttered, shaking his head. "She was going to destroy you." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I know." Eric's fingers tapped against his desk. "We need to act fast. If she realizes you know, she might try to run." I smirked. "She won't run. She thinks I'm completely under her control." Eric nodded. "Then we go public. If we hit her with this before she expects it, she won't have time to destroy evidence or manipulate the story." I met his gaze, my voice steady. "Do it." That evening, Emily walked into the living room with papers in her hands. "I got everything set up," she said, sitting beside me with a bright, eager smile. "The clinic has an opening next week." She handed me the documents, commitment forms. I pretended to read them, my hands shaking just enough to make it look like I was scared. "So, I just sign these?" She nodded. "And I'll take care of the rest." I lifted my eyes to hers, hesitating. "Emily, what if I don't get better?" Her smile didn't falter. "You will, baby." I licked my lips, swallowing thickly. "And the money? The house?" She gave a soft laugh, brushing her fingers through my hair. "Don't worry about any of that. Just focus on getting better." She thought she was so close. I nodded, pretending to consider it. "All right. I'll do it." Her breath hitched. "You will." I forced a weak smile. "Yeah. But let's have a nice dinner first, okay?" Her eyes softened. She thought this was my surrender. "Of course," she whispered. I leaned forward, pressing a slow kiss to her forehead. "To new beginnings." The next morning, I drove us straight to the courthouse. Emily didn't suspect a thing. She sat beside me in the car, humming softly, her fingers tracing slow, absent-minded circles on my thigh. She thought she had won. But as I pulled into the parking lot, her hum faltered. Her brows furrowed as she looked out the window. "This isn't the clinic," she murmured. I let out a breath, gripping the steering wheel. "No, it's not." She turned to me, confusion flickering in her blue eyes. "Jake, what's going on?" I finally met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "You'll see." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, ever so slightly, her jaw tightened. For the first time, doubt crept into her perfect mask. Still, she followed me inside. She had to. If she ran, she'd look guilty. I felt the tension in her every step as we walked through the heavy double doors. Reporters, court officials, her own attorney, they were already inside, waiting. And the moment Emily saw them, her grip on my arm tightened. "Jake," she said slowly, realization dawning. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I just kept walking. She tried to stop, to turn, but it was too late. A bailiff approached us, nodding in my direction. "Mr. Carter, we're ready for you." Emily froze. She looked around wildly, like an animal realizing too late that it had walked into a trap. "Wait," she began, turning to me, her voice sharper now, edged with panic. "You lied to me." I finally looked at her. "No, Emily. I just finally stopped believing yours." The prosecution laid out the case with cold, methodical precision. The recordings, the financial fraud, the medical manipulation, and then, the moment that shattered everything. Eric stood before the jury, his voice steady. "Your Honor, the defense has claimed that my client is suffering from paranoid delusions. That his accusations against his wife are baseless." A pause. "But what if I told you we have irrefutable proof?" The lights dimmed. The screen at the front of the courtroom flickered to life. And then, the video played. At first, darkness. Then, movement. The grainy footage showed me, asleep in bed. My breathing steady. My body unmoving beneath the sheets. Then, the door eased open. Emily stepped inside. She moved slowly, methodically. She reached the bedside table. A metallic glint caught the dim light. The courtroom fell silent. Someone in the audience gasped. Emily, on screen, bent down, brushing the hair from my forehead with a touch so gentle it made my stomach turn. Then, she lifted the blade and dragged it across my arm. In the courtroom, Emily's lawyer froze. The footage continued, Emily watching me, her expression unreadable. Then, she pressed a soft kiss to the wound before slipping away into the shadows. The room exploded. Reporters scrambled, the judge rapped his gavel to restore order, and Emily, the woman who had played the perfect wife for so long, shot to her feet. "That's not," her voice cracked. "That's not what it looks like." "Mrs. Carter," the judge's voice was stern, "sit down." She turned to me, eyes blazing with betrayal. "You set me up." I leaned forward, my voice calm. "No, Emily. I just let you reveal who you really are." Her face drained of color. Her mask shattered. And as the judge declared that the case would proceed to sentencing, Emily sank into her chair, staring blankly ahead. Her game was over. And for the first time in months, I felt free. Emily was found guilty on multiple charges: fraud, conspiracy, assault. She never made it to her clinic. Instead, she went straight to prison. Her lover, Daniel Morgan, was arrested as well. Turns out, he had his own pile of secrets that the prosecution was more than happy to dig into. As for me, I walked out of that courthouse a free man. No more self-doubt. No more waking up bleeding. No more gaslighting, manipulation, or Emily's perfect little lies. I had been so close to losing everything. But I had won. And she had lost. For the first time in a long, long time. I finally felt alive again. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. Your support, likes, and comments truly inspire me to create even more engaging content. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. You're a part of this amazing community, and I'm thrilled to share my stories with you. See you in the next video on YouTube.